We are back talking NFL 2026 offseason. And of course, you are looking and listening to Proline TV, the Ourlads Football Network. I'm your host, Greg DePalma. The Cincinnati Bengals. That's who we're going to talk about today. So John Sheeran is back talking to us once again from A to Z Sports, and also the co-host of the Orange and Black podcast, Insider podcast, actually. And how often are you doing that podcast, John?
That's about a once a week type of situation. Okay. Neither one of the co-hosts, including myself, are technically an insider, but we don't have to tell anyone else that. We can just keep that between us.
Sure. How many days a week do you do it? I mean, what day of the week? Do you normally do it on one specific day or whenever?
Oh, we keep people on our toes. It's typically just once a week, but it could be Wednesday, it could be Friday, it could be Sunday. It just depends on when we're available.
Well, it's a technology today, like that's the way it should be. Okay. We got a lot to talk about here, and I figure what we should do before we get into the obvious stuff is talk about the draft capital, which seems to be pretty good. The 10th pick of the draft, no fifth rounder. Is that the case? But multiple sixth and seventh?
Yes. Yeah. So the Joe Flacco trade took away the fifth rounder, and then they got the Browns, not their main sixth round pick, but like an extra sixth round pick. But I believe it's in the back of the sixth round. So they got that pick swap situation. And then the Bengals traded Logan Wilson to the Dallas Cowboys for a seventh round pick in return. So they have 4 late day 3 picks, no fifth round pick. And then they obviously are 1 through 4. The first 4 rounds, they have a pick there.
Okay. And cap space looks really good as usual. Top 10, over 50 million. And question is, how much will the Bengals spend? So I'm looking at also the cap situation regarding any potential cuts to save any more money. And there does seem to be a couple of guys, but maybe more importantly, I guess maybe just one guy that really sticks out. And that would be TJ Slayton. Would that be the case?
Yeah, Slayton and BJ Hill are kind of listed right now as like the 2 potential ones. I don't necessarily agree with BJ Hill.
Yeah, that's why I didn't mention him. I didn't think so. Yeah, okay.
Just in terms of guys who are, at that age, a position that the Bengals are definitely going to look to add to or try to improve. Like the whole BJ Hill signing in the first place was kind of unexpected, but again, like he's someone that you're fine having on the roster. And I think the same of TJ Slayton as well. I think he definitely played his best football towards the end of this past season. It's just in general, though, there's just not a lot of players. There's not a lot of obvious cap cuts on this team. Unlike the past couple of years, they had like 3 obvious ones that all came true. One of them ended up being retirement, and Sam Hubbard. Like they're not going to cut Orlando Brown Jr., even though they would see a lot of cap space there. It's just hard to find a starting caliber left tackle. Yep. And again, I would be very shocked if both Slayton and Hill were cut, but I wouldn't be completely surprised if one of them was no longer on the team next year.
Okay. Taking a look now at free agency for the Bengals, and this is the big story that everybody's waiting for. So let's throw it out there again. Is Trey Hendricks, is there any chance, whether through an extension, which I know is extremely unlikely, if not 0%, a tag? Is that even possible? What's up with Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals?
It is just another year of complete unknown and somewhat. I mean, I wouldn't say what's happening now is there's any animosity, but I think the Bengals know that they do not want to get into another negotiation war with a player that just wants a deal that the Bengals just aren't willing to offer. Whether that's right or wrong, I happen to think that the Bengals are in the wrong here, but clearly they don't see eye to eye. That hasn't been the case for the past couple of years, ever since they gave him the 1-year extension, which was the whole reason why he was under contract last year in the first place. The reason why a tag could happen is if the Bengals are considering doing something that they've never done before, which is a tag and trade situation. Tag and trades are obviously very rare. The last one to happen was L'Jarius Sneed, who was traded from the Chiefs to the Titans for, like, I believe, an early 3rd round pick. That is what the Bengals would hope for. And like that's the best case scenario here. I don't think that they're going to tag Trey Hendrickson with the expectation that they want him to play on the franchise tag. I think that they saw what happened last year, him sitting out the entire offseason. It was yet another distraction that the Bengals dealt with. They dealt with one with T. Higgins the year prior. They dealt with Jesse Bates being distracted as well before he was even placed on the franchise tag. It's just been constant with these issues, and I think the fact that Trey is coming off of a very injury-filled season. He only played 7 games. The team wasn't very happy with him electing to have season-ending surgery before the season actually ended. They were waiting for him to come back. It's just not the best relationship, and I just don't think that they're going to see him being worth the $30.2 million franchise tag that it would cost, obviously, tag him. So what they're going to do is that they're going to go to the NFL scouting combine here in a week. They're going to ask around to see what other teams, interested teams in Trey Hendrickson, will be willing to offer them in the form of a 2026 draft pick or two. And then if they feel like there's enough of a market there in order to, actually get a trade out, then they will probably place the franchise tag on him towards the later part of the 2-week window. But if they don't tag Trey Hendrickson, then there's just a 0% chance that he's going to be re-signed.
Okay. All right. So that sounds great to hear. We got that. See, that's why John's here on the program to let us know these things. Let's take a look at the rest of the free agency class for the Bengals. Nobody's got the star cachet that Hendrickson has, of course. Taking a look, actually, is there a player in free agency? Like, is there one player that sticks out, like where you can say the Bengals have to re-sign this guy?
The one that I think has the most support behind that is Dalton Risner, who ended up starting the last 6 or 7 games for the team at right guard following an injury to rookie Jalen Rivers. Risner was signed really late in the offseason last year, but he probably should have been signed a lot earlier. He was a very obvious fit for what they needed, just a stable starter at right guard. They tried having Lucas Patrick be that for them last year. They signed him early in free agency back in March last year, and Risner ended up just still being available in the later part of August. So they brought him in basically to round out the offensive line room, and then by the time the middle of the season came around, Jalen Rivers wasn't playing particularly well. Lucas Patrick was hurt for most of that. Dalton Risner ended up being their best option, which, again, was very predictable considering who the player that he's always been compared to the other options, right? So Risner played extremely well, even better than what he previously did with the Minnesota Vikings for a couple of years. And he just really fit along with the offensive line, right in between Ted Karras and Amarius Mims. And he's a guy that's never really made more than like $1.5 million in a year. I think 1 year he had like a $2 million contract. He's going to be 31 years old. He fits really well with what the Bengals do as a pass protector. It just makes all the sense in the world for them to bring him back. So again, he's not going to cost very much. He will probably accept a Bengals type contract. I think that deal probably gets done before free agency. And aside from maybe Joe Flacco, he's probably the highest priority to re-sign on the team.
And that pretty much that's the offensive line for 2026, correct?
Yeah, it should, because Dylan Fairchild played phenomenally for a third-round rookie. Ted Karras is under contract for another year. He was really good in pass protection, and they like what they have at their tackles.
Okay, next up, really, I guess we'll throw in Noah Fant. Bunch of tight ends, so playing time. Really surprised to see that Drew Sample led the tight ends in snaps. What was the reason for that? Is that because did he play a little fullback? Was that part of it?
It is a question that a lot of fans have been asking because Drew Sample doesn't really do anything particularly well. The team just really feels like he's dependable. He's a great teammate, great guy in the locker room. And even his best attribute, which is blocking, like I don't think he's particularly like he's not great there. Like he's average. He's decent. And he's a guy that you don't mind having on the roster, but he's technically their starting tight end, which it's like they can do so much better if they really wanted to invest in that room. But aside from Mike Gesicki, who's not really a tight end, he's more of a slot receiver. They don't really put a lot of resources in that position. They never really have. So Drew Sample is here for at least another year. I don't expect him to get cut. I don't expect anyone to really challenge him as a starter.
Oh, will they bring Fant back, you think?
Probably not. Unfortunately, with Noah Fant, like the talent and the upside was definitely there. I definitely supported them signing him in the early part of training camp last year. He had 3 fumbles that were returned for a touchdown. Like the optics of him being around is just like like it's extremely rare situation. He had some quality, decent outings in there when Mike Gesicki was hurt and Joe Flacco was in that quarterback. Flacco obviously was really productive in his short stint with the Bengals. So like it wasn't all bad necessarily, but I don't think that they're like really pressed to bring him back. Maybe he comes back on a minimum deal if he can't get what he wants in the open market.
What's the health status of Eric All?
No one really knows. He retore the same ACL that he tore at Iowa so he tore the ACL in 2023, and then he retore that same one in 2024, and it required a double surgery, which is why he was out for not only the rest of 2024, but all of 2025. So he's on track to being healthy for the offseason program and training camp at the very least, but no one really knows what he's going to look like. He's going to be in his 3rd year coming off of yet another, catastrophic injury. at that point, like, you don't really know what his athleticism and his power and his strength is going to be like. So I think they count on him being on the offseason roster and seeing what he can do in camp, but I don't think that you can necessarily count on him being a guy that can supplant Drew Sample in terms of snaps.
There's probably another one of these situations where if they don't sign and bring back Fant on the cheap, that they may either just sign a cheap veteran, or who knows, they could one of their middle round picks, or one of the multiple 6th or 7th, throw in another tight end. That's because, like you said, I think a lot of people who don't understand the Bengals and their usage of tight ends might look at the roster and go, "Oh yeah, man, they're gonna use one of their top picks on a tight." Well, it's just not what they do.
So. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily, like, if the guy from Oregon, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's a consensus first round pick. Like, I don't think that's the worst idea necessarily. Again, because you have so much money tied up in your receivers, like for a first round pick at tight end, Kenyon Sadiq, he's a really good prospect, and I think he would add something to that room that they don't have. So I think it's an underrated need, but it's just one that the Bengals just don't seem to prioritize very much.
Yeah, right now we have Sadiq going at 23. It's early, and I could definitely see Sadiq move up in the draft as far as his position, because I don't think he's top 10, but I could see him being top 15, top 20 when it's all said and done. So we'll see. Do the Bengals have a history of movement with the draft? Move up, move down?
In the first round, not really, no. Like, I can remember in 2012, was I think the last time they moved in, like, while the draft was going on, they moved down 6 spots and they drafted Kevin Zeitler instead of David DeCastro. That was a big debate at the time. In the first round, no. Like, the only other time since then, they traded back 9 spots before the draft in order to get Cordy Glenn from the Bills in 2018. But in the first round, you're not going to see them move at all. In the second or third round is when typically that starts.
Okay. In round 1. Got it. All right. Now, defense. So let's look at the defense. Besides Hendrickson, this is where there's a little bit more talent to talk about. All right. What's the deal with Taylor Britt? Is it just one of those situations where, unless it's going to be cheap, that they just want to just start over, or do they think that there's still something to work with there?
I don't think they even think that there's something to work with there, which is, it's shocking considering what his trajectory seemed to be following his second year. They gave him every opportunity to start the past couple of years, and he just hasn't really held on to a spot. He's been benched at least 3 times in the middle of games over the last 2 seasons with two different defensive coordinators. He also got into some off-field trouble. He spent a handful of days in jail for some reckless driving incidents. It just seems like for the past couple of years, his head has not been really focused on where it should be, and that's led to extremely inconsistent play. And I really do think that a fresh start here for both sides is what they're going to do. So I'm not even sure they're going to offer him a contract, to be honest with you.
All right. And there's 4 other DBs. To Jalen Davis, is he going to resign?
Jalen Davis has unofficially resigned. So he agreed to terms, I think, last night, and he will officially put pen to paper later this week.
Okay. So what about the other guys in the defensive backfield? Geno Stone, is it also time to move on from him?
Yeah. 100%. Again, another situation where I don't think a contract will even be offered here. Maybe if he wants to play on a minimum deal and be a backup, maybe. But I think he sees himself as a starter, and the Bengals are not going to see him as a starter anymore.
Yeah, I don't know where that'll be, but all right. Yeah. Anderson, Wilson, can those guys? Should either of those guys come back?
Yeah, Tyson Anderson is one of their special team staples. So if he wants to come back on a minimum 2-year deal to be a special teamer, I think that's probably on the cards. And I think along the same lines with Wilson, again, just someone that can have depth there, especially if Taylor Britt leaves.
Okay. All right. How about Joseph Asai? What, did he elevate his play this year to get him a contract?
I think his play was basically the exact same as it has been for any of the years that he's been healthy. And it's not bad, right? Mm-hmm. I think Joseph Asai is fine to have as one of your defensive ends in a rotation. He was given the opportunity to be a starter and kind of advance himself and really show a little bit more, which is why I think if the Bengals do offer him a contract, it'll be very similar relative to the cap's growth. So it could be like a 1-year, $8 million deal or $9 million deal. Last year was 6.5. But I think at this point in his career, he's 25, 26 years old. He's got a really aggressive agent, David Mulugeta. I think he's going to be looking for something more long-term, and I'm not sure the Bengals necessarily see that or have seen enough growth out of him in order to get that. But it could be a situation like again, this time last year, I was not expecting BJ Hill to come back, particularly because of his age, but he was just kind of the same player. But if the Bengals see the rest of a very saturated defensive end market not work out the way that they want, and Joseph Ossai is still there, I could see a scenario in which they bring him back. But I do think he's going to be looking for more than what the Bengals are probably going to be offering.
Yeah, edge rushers, they're not as valuable as offensive tackles because they don't get out there very often, if ever. But it's really hard to get your hands on a good edge rusher, as we know. And looking at the guys that are available, most of them are like over 30, and some of them are interesting. But for the most part, yeah, I could see other teams saying, "Sure, we'll give Joseph Asai a long-term deal. We got no problem with that." So. Maybe that's what it'll come down to is if the Bengals are willing to give him a long-term deal. So probably not going to see him back with 1 year. I would doubt that, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Again, like I think at this point he doesn't want to keep doing the 1 year contract and rental and just wants some stability, right? As anyone in his position would.
Yep. Okay. What about Cam Sample?
Not the exact same as Joseph Ossai, but I think someone that the Bengals just kind of know who he is at this point. He's just a rotational guy, a base end, doesn't really offer you anything as a pass rusher. I think at this point, with Cedric Johnson, Isaiah Foskey kind of backing up that room, and especially considering the fact that they're going to be drafting another edge rusher like they did last year with Shamar Stewart, I just don't think that there's necessarily room for Cam Sample at this point. Again, it's going to depend on how free agency goes, but even if he does come back, it'll be a very minimum 1 year deal, maybe in the range of like $2 million. And again, like if he wants to have a fresher start and maybe reunite with Lou and Arumo in Indianapolis, if they can't get Trey Hendrickson, I think something like that could fall for him.
Okay. All right. Are there any players? Well, actually, let's start with the rookies. How did the rookie class go?
It was Dylan Fairchild and basically nothing else, unfortunately. So Shamar Stewart, even in the times when he was healthy, looked exactly like a guy that needs a lot more seasoning than he came into the NFL with, which, as expected, right? He didn't necessarily fall below expectations, but he definitely didn't exceed them. Demetrius Knight did actually have some decent expectations as a guy that was going to start immediately, but the game just looked far too fast for him. Similar situation with Barrett Carter, who missed a lot of tackles and took a lot of bad angles. It was a very rough year for the Bengals linebacking core as a whole, but that's the reality when you have two rookies basically starting by the middle of the season. Again, like the speed of the game, it just gets to you, and it is naturally a position in which it takes a year or two to really get your feet under you, kind of like defensive tackle, right? So the Bengals put a lot of faith in a second and a fourth round pick, and they got exactly what they invested in. Like it was just a bunch of struggles. But Dylan Fairchild, again, the third round pick at guard, just thrust it in there at left guard. He played really well. I think he looked like a guy that he looked like who I thought or who I hoped he would be in 2026 or 2027. So I really like the progression that he's already made, and that makes me believe that he's going to be even better in 2026, which is really promising. And then your fifth and your sixth and the seventh round picks, like they were just kind of what you expected.
Yeah, that's good news. Of course, the Bengals fans, anytime they can get that sort of news on the offensive line, because at this point, Mims is progressing well. Correct? Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a lot more there, or do you think that he is what he is?
I think what Mims did towards the end of this past season is like, okay, like the lights officially look to be on for like a first round pick. He was kind of keeping his head above water as a rookie. He was showing flashes, and there was some flashes here and there in the beginning of this past season, but then it was flashes like that were just drawn out into a week-long consistent stretch. I'm having a hard time wording this, but he looked like he was about to like reach his ceiling. Like it looked like, yes, this is the type of guy that you invest the first round pick in with all the tools and all the athleticism. It looked like it was all kind of coming together towards the end of this past season, and they're expecting that to be basically who he is going forward as a 23, 24-year-old starter.
You think they're going to invest early enough in the draft at tackle just so they get maybe that next guy? Because they don't really have. I mean, I don't know if they really like Cody Ford is he the official swing on the team?
Yeah, Cody Ford is the swing, and he's just not necessarily good. Like I wouldn't have brought him back last year, but they wanted him back for a 2-year deal. I think if there's going to be any sort of like notable cap cut, I could definitely see Cody Ford being that guy. It could maybe depend on what happens in the draft, though, because you're right. I think within the first 3 rounds, the Bengals are going to be targeting a tackle to eventually take over for Orlando Brown Jr. at left tackle. Because again, it's a position that it's really hard to find in free agency. The price of even mediocre tackles is going up to a point where I don't know if the Bengals want to get there. They always typically like drafting at that position anyways, and they kind of just fell into Orlando Brown Jr. in the first place. So drafting someone in the second or third round after you first address the defense, whatever defensive end or defensive tackle, I can definitely see the Bengals addressing with a day 2 pick and offensive tackle to be the eventual replacement for Orlando Brown and just be the swing tackle reserve in 2026.
Yeah, let's see. What does this look like? Probably not very good. Yeah, this is not very good at all. Not surprising. Again, as we said, you're just not gonna. It's the one position outside of quarterback in all of football that if you got a good one, you don't let them go. You just can't. This is it's unfortunate too that it's so rare to find these guys. I don't know if it was this difficult in 20 years ago or whatever the case may be, but sure is difficult nowadays. Okay, so let's talk about developing players. Are there, start on offense, are there any players on offense, any young players that fans maybe that don't follow the team very often, they don't realize that this is a guy that the Bengals think will be able to take a next step next season?
So Mitchell Tinsley became a fan favorite because of the fact that he he was one of the last people to make the roster at wide receiver. He was really dominant in the preseason, and whenever he got on the field in the regular season, he just made plays. He caught a couple of touchdowns, made some spectacular catches in relief of T. Higgins or Jamar Chase, whomever ended up not being in that game. I think there's another gear that he can kind of take as a wide receiver, and especially considering the fact that what they have in Andre Josevich is fine, but I think they can do better as the third wide receiver in that starting trio. Maybe someone who's more natural in the slot. I don't know if that's Mitchell Tinsley necessarily. I think a slot receiver could be a target in the draft as well, or it could be in a very weak free agency class for wideouts, or affordable, I should say, for specifically slot receivers. So I'm interested to see if Mitchell Tinsley can take that next step. I don't think I have a lot of hope for Charlie Jones necessarily because he's been here for the last 3 years. I just haven't really seen him just really take that step or really look like he's capable of taking that step. But Mitchell Tinsley comes into this offseason with a lot of momentum, and I'm interested to see if he ends up having another gear in him.
Okay. Did you see enough of Brooks to tell you whether or not he can take another step next year and maybe at some point, hopefully sooner than later, make Samaje Perine expendable?
Yeah, I think the evaluation on Brooks, who he was at the college, is basically the same. He just didn't really carry the ball enough for any of that to bear fruit necessarily. But I wouldn't say that he's I wouldn't say that they think any less of him than they thought of him last year. He just ended up being a guy that fell in the draft because it was such a deep running back class. So their trust in Perine, though, is very much unparalleled, and I don't foresee Brooks entering training camp as running back 2 over Perine. I think something will probably have to happen to Perine for Brooks to really get that opportunity. But again, he's going to be on the roster. He's probably going to be on the roster next year as well, when Perine's probably not going to be on the roster. So that could be the time in which Brooks makes that jump, and maybe he gets some opportunities with some injuries.
Is there still hope, you think, that in a year or two, Matt Lee could take over at center?
I hope so, because again, I think really highly of him. I thought he was another guy that fell in the draft inexplicably, but he's been injured for the past couple of years on and off. There's a reason why he is listed as third here on the depth chart. He almost ended the year on injured reserve. Then he came back. But even in general, like the rumors about him is that they don't really feel highly confident in him, whether or not he's just not showing it in practice or whatnot. There's a good reason why Lucas Patrick may be re-signed to be at the backup center next year, because they just don't have a lot of confidence in Matt Lee. And that makes sense considering he's a 7th round pick, and some guys just don't develop like they should coming out of college. But the guy he was in college, though, like it just seemed like this guy has the chance to be a potential starter, and it doesn't seem like that's the case so far. But it's still early.
Okay. And let's see what's now. Let's move over to the defensive side. Same question. Give us any, if possible, young players that could take that next step.
This is interesting because I think last year there were so many guys that were given that chance, and very few of them actually proved like they were taking that. Like Miles Murphy obviously took a step in the middle of the season. Dax Hill, DJ Turner, like they showed like they belong necessarily. Jordan Battle, I think, is still the jury is still probably out. I think they're comfortable enough with him penciling him in as a starter at safety, but if an obvious upgrade became available to them, then I wouldn't be surprised if they bumped him down to safety 3 like he was in the first couple of years. Um, I'm not 100% out on both the linebackers, though. I wouldn't be surprised if Demetrius Knight specifically had a lot more to give, and just once he becomes more comfortable with the speed of the NFL, like he's obviously a really good athlete. He was productive in his 1 year at South Carolina. He just came into the league not that experienced despite being 24, 25 years old. So I think there's more that Demetrius Knight can give, and I think the Bengals are going to approach the linebacker position specifically as like, okay, we just need a stable veteran here to play significant snaps and to help guide Knight and Carter along, because those two are the future right now at linebacker. And I think I have more confidence in Knight than Carter eventually becoming a solid starter.
What about McKinley or Jenkins in the middle of the defense? Did they take another step or not really last year?
Yeah, so Jenkins basically plateaued during his second season. There just wasn't enough that you saw as a pass rusher. They're trying to make him this penetrating 3 technique, and it's just not necessarily his game. It wasn't his game at Michigan, as you know very well, as someone who watched him in college. So again, like someone who can fill out the back of the defensive tackle room, I think he's fine, but you kind of want more for a second round pick entering his 3rd year. So he really does need to start showing something as a pass rusher. McKinley Jackson, I think, has flashed a little bit more. Like his backfield production and his penetrating skills, I think, are more evident. He ended up requesting a trade in the middle of the season because he just wasn't playing at all. Like they had Mike Pennell, who they promoted from the practice squad, playing over him. They didn't really trust McKinley Jackson in the preseason and in training camp, and he almost didn't make the roster entirely. So he wanted another chance to play somewhere else. So then after they didn't trade him at the deadline, they started playing him more, and he started to look pretty good. So maybe that was just him being motivated to show the Bengals that like I can play and I deserve to be on the team. But I think there's been more flashes with McKinley compared to Jenkins. It's just like McKinley Jackson is this nose tackle body, but he plays like a 3 technique. So he's a very odd player, and it's a very weird fit in the Bengals scheme. But I think he's still worth keeping around for the offseason.
Okay. And I guess that's about it on defense for any of those players. Okay. And what did you think about Shamar Stewart? I know there was, the injury and all that. That's never good. Do you just look at it as just, a redshirt year, basically? It's just too early to tell.
Yeah. I wasn't very high on Stewart coming out because of his production, because he just clearly just needs a lot of work. So my expectations for him as a rookie weren't very high. And it's just someone that I don't expect, even in 2026, even if he's fully healthy, I'm not expecting a starting caliber player. I think Myles Murphy is literally just the blueprint of what you hope Shamar Stewart becomes, because Murphy didn't start really bearing fruit until the middle of his 3rd season. And now he's looked at as someone who is going to be an unquestioned starter for a defensive line that needs as many starters as possible. So with Shamar, like the explosion is there, the power is there. I think there's definite upside in him being moved towards the interior of the defensive line on passing downs at defensive tackle, especially because the Bengals don't really have that as a true defensive tackle on the roster. So there's a role for Shamar Stewart to be on the field on passing downs and just use his speed to power to his advantage and just try to create disruption like that. When he's healthy, I'm confident that he can do that. But in terms of winning one-on-one situations on the edge, I'm not there yet. And I don't think he's going to be there yet really until maybe 2027.
You mentioned Cedric Johnson. Is he somebody that can now get into the mix as far as a contributor, which is pretty good for a 6th rounder?
Yeah, like I think he's on track to stay on the team, and like you said, for a 6th rounder, that's typically all that you ask for at that point. I think he's like the perfect final defensive end of this group, someone who has a little bit more bend than you expect, but also a pretty decent athlete. And yeah, when he's had the opportunities to rush the passer, he's kind of surprised. So I think he's worth keeping around and worth being like one of the final active guys on game days.
Okay. Let's now get to the official needs for Cincinnati this offseason. So we'll start first of all with, is there a definite number 1 need that every fan knows, and they'd be shocked if that position was not taken at number 10 overall?
I think right now, pass rushers just in general should be the biggest need. And I think the best case scenario for the Bengals is if a guy like Ruben Bain or even Arnold Reese, if he were to fall, that's priority number 1. right now for the Bengals offseason. They're going to be focused on that position group in free agency. It's not a really good free agent class for defensive tackles, but it is pretty deep in defensive end. And right now it's looking like it's a pretty decent defensive end class in the draft as well.
Yes.
So what they do at defensive tackle is going to be interesting. They might have to get creative, but I would be shocked if the Bengals didn't have a notable free agent sign at defensive end, or again, if one of David Bailey, Ruben Bain were available to them at 10th overall, that would be who I think the favorite is. I know a lot of fans are going to say that safety is the biggest need, and I don't disagree with that, considering the fact that Geno Stone is one of the worst starting safeties in the NFL, and it's been such a weakness ever since Jesse Bates left. But right now, it's Caleb Downs as like your ideal target for that position, and I think the Bengals are probably going to end up signing a starting caliber safety, and again, another really deep free agent class at that position. So I'm not expecting that to be a huge need when the draft comes around. Whereas again, it's really hard to sign free pass rushers in free agency, and that's been an area where the Bengals have not been shy at drafting early in the draft.
Yeah, it does look like there's momentum for Caleb to be a top 5 pick, as well as I think he should be. Now, again, we don't normally see safeties chosen at high anymore, so I'm still kind of questionable on how that's going to go. But hey, I hope so. I think he deserves it. He's that talented. I don't think the Bengals will get that lucky that he'd be available at 10, but I guess you do never know. So you've got edge number 1. So does that mean defensive tackle and safety are kind of 2-3?
Yeah, I would say that's fair. I think any way that you look at those 3 positions, if you want to order them in however way that you want, I can see the arguments for that. But again, in terms of just value, in terms of how difficult it is to get like the best players, I think pass rusher in general just has to be at the top of that list.
All right. Now let's talk about the remaining needs for the team. Give a couple more of the position needs.
Yeah, so linebacker has to be there too. Like they can't just not touch the group after what happened last year. They can't have both Knight and Carter as these unquestioned starters. You need at least some veteran presence there, and I think that will come in the form of like an affordable free agent. So right now you have all 3 levels of the defense that needs attention, and that's to be expected considering how terrible the defense was last year. I think Jalen Davis coming back at pencil him in as your slot corner, as your starting slot cornerback right now. I think that's the expectation. So that's not that glaring of a need. So a cornerback, they're pretty much set. They're going to have discussions with Dax Hill and DJ Turner about extensions. And that really just leaves the offense in terms of where they're at right now. If they don't bring back Dalton Reisner, right guard becomes arguably one of their biggest needs. But again, it's very much presumed that Reisner will be affordable and he can be brought back. So other than that, if they want to upgrade over Drew Sample at tight end, that can be considered a need, and just swing tackle just because Cody Ford is just not there, and they need an answer for the future.
Okay, so because you're right. I mean, even though they need another linebacker, that's going to come via free agent. So once they get to the draft, maybe unless they sign a couple of veterans, it's still possible that tight end or a swing tackle. All right, so you mentioned Jalen Davis at the nickel. Does that mean with Taylor Britt gone that it's going to be Turner and Hill on the outside and Davis on the inside?
Yes, because that was a trio that worked really well at the end of this past season. I think Dax has played his best football in general as a boundary cornerback, and DJ Turner probably should have been a Pro Bowl last year at that position. So they love both those guys on the outside.
And then again, at safety, you're looking at potentially 2 upgraded, at maybe even 3 overall free agency draft.
I would say 1 for sure. Duke Tobin did mention Jordan Battle as someone that they want to build around, so I think that makes Battle safe for now.
Okay.
But again, like if the scenario happens in which they sign a safety to start to replace Geno Stone and Caleb Downs is available and he's their best player on the board, I don't think they would pass up Caleb Downs, and at that point, obviously, you would just slide Jordan Battle under them. So that's the scenario in which 2 would come into play.
Okay. Otherwise, how's special teams looking?
Pretty good. William Wagner was fine as a rookie long snapper. Ryan Rico made a jump as a punter in year 2, and Evan McPherson kind of came back to what they expect him to be after having a down year. So special teams, no complaints. And
Charlie Jones does. I know he's good for a kick return touchdown every year. So that's pretty much he's locked in there, right? That's his job.
Yeah, because again, you can't really count on him as a receiver, but he's under contract for another year, and he's pretty decent as a kickoff returner.
All right, John, I appreciate your time as always, and we'll be looking out for your next podcast on the Orange and Black Insider podcast. The link is in the description of this video, so you can check that out. John's just going to hold back when it's going to be available, so that's why you need to subscribe So you'll be informed whenever it is, and it'll hit that bell. That'll make it easier for you. And of course, we also have a link in the description for your content at A2Zsports.com. So again, thanks a lot, John. I look forward to at least getting a chance to talk to you after the draft when we can take a look at as a whole to see how the entire offseason went for the Bengals.
Absolutely, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, John. All right, that is John Sheeran talking Bengals here on Proline TV, the Ourlads Football Network. We have another one of these offseason discussions coming up later today. It's actually going to be at 9 o'clock tonight. If you're watching live, we are at 4:37 p.m. Eastern. At 9 Eastern, Travis D. Holmes is going to be with us to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars from BigCatCountry.com. Travis was with us to start the 2025 season. That was his first. That was the first time we interviewed Travis. So a nice little synergy there for the Jags. They've been struggling the last few years. So Travis comes on and Jags make the playoffs. So that worked out. Anyway, we'll talk about the Jacksonville Jags, and they have some really big questions at running back with Etienne and at linebacker with Lloyd. And unlike the Bengals, the Jags do not have a lot of cash. They are not flush with funds, salary funds. And so they're going to have to make some moves. Now, could they tag one of those players? Because they do not have enough cash to sign both key players long-term. Well, we'll get the answers to those questions later on tonight with Travis D. Holmes talking about the Jacksonville Jags. As far as the rest of the content here on Proline TV and the Ourlads Football Network, 2 more interviews tomorrow. That's right. We're doing it again tomorrow twice. The Pittsburgh Steelers, we're going to be doing that with Alex Kozora at 4 o'clock Eastern on Thursday. And then at 7 Eastern, Adam Patrick is going to join us to talk about the Minnesota Vikings. So again, we're going to go right back at it 2 more times, Pittsburgh and the Minnesota Vikings. That's tomorrow. Both teams with questions at quarterback. Both teams with some big front office moves this offseason, whether it be coaching, general manager. So a lot to talk about with Alex and with Adam. That's tomorrow when we're talking some football with those guys, again, here on Proline TV and the Ourlads Football Network. As far as the rest of the content at Proline TV, we are going to talk some more college basketball on Friday as usual. We're going to really start picking it up with our college basketball content. Now it's been once a week, every Friday, get you ready for Saturday, but we're getting real close to talking more college basketball, including on our Thursday show where Mark Lawrence hosts the Playbook ATS podcast every Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern. So I'm sure we're going to talk some college basketball because we have a big game coming up on Saturday between Duke and Michigan. Very rare matchup of 2 of the best teams in college basketball from different conferences at this stage of the season. So especially those 2 programs. So we're going to talk, I'm sure, about that and some other college basketball and also some football. I think we're going to we'll dabble into maybe some future talk in the NFL. I don't know if we're going to talk college futures, but I think we're going to talk some NFL future talk. So give you a little heads up on what we think about the futures, Super Bowl futures this early, even before free agency, which begins in a few weeks, of course. So we're going to be here every step of the way with all of our coverage and the NFL, especially, we've got the combine coming up here real soon. We are going to be posting we're going to be publishing Ourlads, the 2026 draft guide. Should be out in about 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks. I have to get working on it. I have a deadline of mid-March. Right now, I've been tasked with just 5 team reports. So I'm going to try to get that done really quick. And who knows, maybe I'll get some more assignments there. But the Bengals are one of them. So when you check out the Ourlads draft guide for 2026 and you read the Bengals team page, you'll know the work in there was done by me. And a lot of my information comes from John. So I've got the Bengals, the Browns, the Lions, the Panthers, and the Broncos. Those are the 5 teams that I am tasked with the draft guide. And then maybe I'll be lucky enough to get a few more of those before it's all said and done. But again, don't forget to order your Ourlads draft guide as soon as possible. It is linked in the description area of this video and all of our videos from all of our interviews. So check that out. And if you're sick of ads bouncing up all over the place on the Ourlads website, click the insider link. Sign up for that. No more ads. And besides that, you get some additional bonus content. Okay, so that is going to wrap it up here. Once again, thanks to John Sheeran. I'm Greg DePalma. We'll see you tonight. That's our next video here on Proline TV when we talk about the Jacksonville Jags.